Good morning and welcome to the DGAP morning briefing. I'm Henning Hoff, Executive Editor of Internationale Politik Quarterly. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine enters day 811, about 2 years, 3 months. Since we had our last morning briefing, Russia has been opening a new front by putting pressure on and attacking Kharkiv from the north. This goes hand in hand with terror bombing of the civilian population of Ukraine's second biggest city of 1.3 million people. We will return to the war soon, but in this edition of the DGAP morning briefing, we will focus on financial and budgetary questions related to the military dimension of Germany's Zeitenwende. It is a special edition as it is part of the German Security Policy Forum 2024, organized by the Federal Academy for Security Policy, or BAX, which I'd like to thank for the cooperation. Ever since Chancellor Olaf Scholz first spoke of this sea change or historical turn on February the 27th, 2022, the German government has been struggling to live up to its own ambitions and expectations, let alone those of its Western allies and the Ukrainians. Strategic objectives seem to be out of sync with industrial and financial realities in Germany and in Europe. To discuss all these questions related to the financial dimension of the Zeitenwende, I have the great pleasure of welcoming Bettina Hagedorn, member of the Bundestag for the German Social Democrats, or SPD, and vice chair of the Budget Committee. Hailing from Kiel in the very north of Germany, she has been a member of parliament since 2002, and most recently was parliamentary state secretary at the German Finance Ministry from 2018 to late 2021, when current Chancellor Olaf Scholz was finance minister. Welcome, Bettina Hagedorn. Next, we will be hearing from Christoph Atzpodien, Chief Executive Officer of the German Security and Defense Industry Association, known by its German acronym BDSV. Dr. Atzpodien has been in his current role since 2017, after a long career at ThyssenKrupp, where he inter alia served as CEO of the Marine Division of ThyssenKrupp. He just told me. Welcome, Dr. Atzpodien.
Good morning, thank you.
And last but not least, we will be hearing from my DGAP colleague, Dr. Christian Mölling, head of the Center for Security and Defense here at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Before joining us in 2017, Christian had roles inter alia with the German Marshall Fund and the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, SWP. He has been commenting on the Zeitenwende and on Russia's war against Ukraine widely across German international media, inter alia in a podcast for Stern magazine and on the ZDF television channel. Welcome, Christian.
Thanks for having me.
Some quick housekeeping remarks. To start us off, each panelist will offer an initial input of about 5 to 6 minutes. After some discussion on the panel, about 30 minutes in, we will be opening for your questions and comments. For the Q&A, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and ideally put your question in person to the panel. You're also welcome to use the chat function to put questions and comments into the chat. And I'll do my very best to put it to the panelists. Please note that the briefing is recorded and that we will have to close on time at 9:30 a.m. And with a word of thanks to my colleagues, Johann Stöckmann, head of the Director's Office here at the German Council of Foreign Relations, and our Central Eastern European expert, Milan Nitsch. Both are instrumental in keeping these morning briefings running, as well as to our colleagues at the events and the communication teams. Let's start with Bettina Hagedorn. Floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everybody. Of course, it's a difficult situation for me as a parliamentarian to talk about the budget 2025 today because we haven't seen it yet. But of course, in Germany, all the discussions have the headline that our finance minister, Lindner, he wants to, because of our constitution, and because it was before the war in Ukraine, it was decided among the coalition that we want to keep the credit line that is given by our constitution since 2009. But then Putin went to with his aggression on the Ukraine and the war. And so since then, everything changed. And of course, everything changes, to my mind, to the opinion of the Social Democratic Party, also in finance and budget affairs. But we have to agree with three parties. It is the first coalition among three partners in the history of Germany. And of course, it's not easy. And that is spoken very diplomatically. So the government is now in the discussions how they manage this, and they have to give the proposal to the parliament on the 3rd of July. And so on the 4th of July in Germany, we, the parliamentarians, start the discussion and will end up in November to build a budget for 2025. At the moment, it's really hard to believe for me that everything will be fine. But one thing I'm very sure, that everything that we need in the Ministry of Defense will be given, will be respected, because there's a big agreement in the German parliament among the democratic parties that we have to do everything that is necessary to help the Ukraine in the way we want and need to help them. But in Germany, a lot of people are not aware how much we already do. So since I'm in budget committee since 22 years, let me tell you that I'm really aware how much we did since February 2022 financially. Not only this 100 billion euro package that is almost decided where we invested, but in the budget committee we have almost every Wednesday when we have our meetings, we decide about billions for defense affairs to help Ukraine and to do everything that we have promised to do for the NATO. The same is we, for the first time, decided to have in Lithuania a brigade, and that will cost a lot of money and people to do this, but we are very sure altogether, without any conflicts in the coalition, that we will do that. And since I'm also the vice chairman of the Baltic German Parliamentarian Group, I can tell you I'm a lot in the Baltic countries, and I know that the people are very much relying on us, that we do what we promise to do, but that they also appreciate it a lot. And the whole Baltic region, not only the Baltic seas, but also Sweden and Finland, being in the NATO now, have changed the whole situation in the Baltic region a lot. But what is difficult about the budget is not only what we need for in the Ministry of Defense, but that we also would need, to our opinion, more money that the finance minister wants to spend in the Ministry of External Affairs with Annalena Baerbock, and in the Ministry of Development with Svenja Schulze. We will have here in Berlin the conference in July for rebuilding in Ukraine. What got destroyed in the war? We need a lot of money for that, to give the people hope that they stay in the Ukraine and do not want to go if it's to their opinion not longer possible to stay there because everything is destroyed. So we have to do a lot there, and we will do this, and we already do. But of course, it needs the solidarity of other European partners as well, especially since that we look to November and to the US, and everybody in Europe needs to do more. And so I look rather to the south or to the west of Europe, that we need more solidarity from these nations, because the German, the money that Germany spends is the most in Europe, and we cannot do this all by ourselves. We need more European solidarity. But we have on the 9th of June the elections in Europe, and so at this moment it's kind of difficult to discuss these things openly, but we will have to after the European election. And I hope very much that the solidarity in Europe then grows. We all know that regarding the nationalistic parties that try to be more powerful in the European Parliament, that would be very bad for Europe and for the Ukraine. So we have together to try to strengthen the democratic parties, because then we can be assured that the solidarity with Ukraine will grow. And I think for the first moment that should be enough. I'm very glad to hear your questions and trying to answer them.
Thank you very much. I've already got a few questions, but let's move on to our other panelists. Dr. Atzpodien, please.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the chance to provide the industry perspective. So first of all, yes, we have been neglecting the costs of security for decades. And so the 24th of February 2022 was really a wake-up call for everybody, which resulted in the decision on the famous extra budget for the Bundeswehr, which was sort of overdue because it was just reflecting the pipeline of unfulfilled procurement wishes of the years before. In the meantime, my impression is that we have put ourselves again to a sort of rest, although there is no reason to rest. And if I remember the Munich Security Conference in February, everybody was of the opinion that we have to make sure that we can deter aggression in at least 4 to 5 years from now, and that we have to do much more in order to gear up the armament of our armed forces, but also the armed forces in NATO. With this background, it was really not understandable that Minister Pistorius' request last year to have an extra 10 billion for his regular budget of defense, of the defense ministry, was completely neglected by the government, but also by the parliament. He got 1.7 billion just in order to compensate for inflation. And if you now see the actual situation of the budget, and I want to be a little bit more precise maybe and more to the point than Mrs. Hagedorn could be as a politician being involved in all these debates. Let me describe the situation as follows. Actually, we face a situation where the extra budget of 100 billion will be consumed at the latest by 2027. The regular budget of the MOD, of our Ministry of Defense, according to the current planning in place, will be flat 52 billion in each of the upcoming years. And we know, and I think all the politicians involved clearly are aware of the fact that this kind of budget of 22 billion in 2 years from now will not allow one single euro anymore for additional armament. It will just be sufficient for the fixed and running costs. And this is, of course, not a situation which can be tolerated. And for us as industry, it creates the impression, an impression of uncertainty. So we have done already a lot. Many of our companies have increased their capacities on their own risk to a certain extent, but they need business cases. They need to know whether in, let's say, 4 or 5 years from now, they will receive orders from our governmental client to really reflect a further build up of capacities in ammunition, for example, or armored vehicles or whatever it is. So it desperately needs right now, where we are in the process of the new budget for 25 and the following years, a signal that the budget will be increased substantially. And just to let you know one more fact, which is openly known, is that our MOD, our Ministry of Defense, is currently planning for the year 2028 already with a budget figure of 97 billion. That is what they openly say. So there is a gap between what they plan with and the official basis of 45 billion only in the year 28. And of course, this means that in the years before, 27, 26, it also needs more than 52 billion. Altogether, we are talking about another 100 billion missing only for our armed forces from now to the year 28, plus what we are missing in means for general security purposes, let's say, making our infrastructure stronger, making our resilience stronger against cyber attacks and whatever it is. So at the moment, everybody, and this is really what I want to address, everybody in our government really knows these kind of needs, but they are sort of kept in tactical political reasons in a debate where they might not be able to really come up with this kind of signal, which I mentioned. And I recently, as this is a format together with BAX, I visited a discussion with Minister Habeck in the BAX Academy only a couple of days ago, and I had the opportunity to ask him about this issue. And I said, "What will you do as a Minister of Economy and Vice Chancellor to solve this budgetary problem?" And he responded very friendly, and it sounded all quite well, but in fact, at the end, he said it will not happen before the general elections 25. And this means that we are going to lose another 2 years in our overall armament goals. I would like to close with a quote, which I listened to from NATO General Secretary Stoltenberg in connection with the Munich Security Conference last year, 2023, when he said, spending more money for defense always means having less money for other important tasks. But, and that was his key question, what can be more important than securing our peace and security? And this is exactly the problem which we have to address. And this is what I hope our government will finally manage to do, because we as industry need this signal in order to go on building up our capacities. And I tell you, I promise you, all of the member companies of BDSV, and we have 220 member companies, are willing to do that if they can contribute to our defense and to our overall resilience. Thank you for the moment.
Thank you very much. Interesting point you made there at the end. I think Defense Minister Pistorius is trying to argue a similar, making a similar case to the finance ministers about the Schuldenbremse and the need for our country to be defended well. What kind of ranks higher in the priorities? But let's move on to Christian now, Christian Mölling. And then I've got a few questions for our panelists. Christian, please.
Yeah, thanks, Henning. Couple of points. Maybe to start with the kind of the obvious one. Nothing has changed really since last year. wrote a paper at DGAP last year about Zeitenwende, and it's called basically time loop and not times of change. And it basically, so all the predictions that you can see in the graphs are still relevant and still kind of even true, which shows that there hasn't been much of a development since last year in the financial outlook. That's the first thing. Second, on what Mr. Atzpodien just said, just as a kind of broadening the perspective, there are two different ways of looking at the budget from the kind of defense and especially defense procurement side. The one side is the government that says, hey, industry, just trust us. You know, look into the business context. It has never been better than now. And just trust us, with the next government, the money will be there. And of course, just be sure the money currently is available and we have financed all the needs until even into the next government. The industrial perspective is, yes, that may be true. But first of all, we don't trust you, government, because you may no longer be the government in 2 years' time. And what you promise us now is then basically gone. And that's the rule of democracy, right? Things can change. And therefore, we basically have to look for opportunities here. And if the German government doesn't give the opportunities to others, then of course it's true that there is a kind of a better business context globally, because globally defense procurement opportunities are increasing. So the industry would not die. It would just start producing for others and not for Germany. And that has been the case all the years before. That's why we had the discussion about exports. That's also why we had to to re-import the famous IRIS-T systems from Egypt, because they have never been produced for Germany at that time. Third point, it is especially true, it's not about defense at all. It's about, and that's, if you hear Minister Pistorius talking about Kriegstüchtigkeit, so the readiness to, about the war, it's about everything else than the armed forces. This is about an infrastructure in Germany that doesn't work, the digitalization that has not come to bear so far, that doesn't really get us somewhere else. That's about cybersecurity, that's about energy security. So there are many things where not only in the defense area, but in many other areas, the country is not fit or is not at 100% of what it could possibly deliver. And that's only the peacetime. Even times of crisis or in times of war, all these critical infrastructures would come under pressure. And that would basically mean we are the ones who would possibly break down quite early compared to other countries around Europe that have invested into the infrastructure. Fourth point, this is of course all about topics. At the end of the day, it's all about politics. The mechanics are pretty clear. In economics, you can either increase the tax, you can increase the debt, or you can reshuffle the budget. And currently, the governing parties favor one of the solutions and especially exclude one of the others. So this is the reason why we currently have no consensus on where we could go. And that's the reason why everybody is not tries to, but comes to the conclusion that a solution cannot be reached possibly before the elections. The most important point here is, on the one hand, this is a very much, everything that I have said is a very much a domestic perspective, how we as Germany look at it. But there is, especially in times of war, there is an external perspective, and that has to do with deterrence and reassurance. Whatever we do is watched closely by our allies as well as by our enemies. And I guess some of people here in this call represent one of these groups, either or. So the reassurance part is making clear to all our partners that we will be on board not only now, but for the long term. And that is seriously important, because what you have decreased, security and defense, for 30 years, you cannot increase or rebuild within 2 or 3 years. So it needs a constant investment into the security to just rebuild the buffer, so to say. And the deterrence part is also pretty clear. If you sit in the Kremlin, then Germany is an open book for you, as every other democracy, because our public spending is public. You can basically see what's happening. If you sit in the Kremlin, you would be very, very calm for the moment, because you see that one of the most important players in Europe, which is Germany, is not ready to put everything into the game, and is basically so tied with his money that there is no kind of that as Russia, you don't have to fear that we are able to activate something, especially not after the legal ruling or the advice from the Constitutional Court that basically hampers additional and kind of snap investments because of emergency situations. So there we are basically stuck. The fiscal deterrence that we could give by kind of even let's do it very extreme, a carte blanche to the Ministry of Defense, but also the other ministries which are responsible for total defense, is not there. So if you are Russia, you sleep quite well.
Thank you very much, Christian, with these various takes on where we are. I would like to give it back to Bettina Hagedorn to give her an opportunity to react to a few points which were raised. My 2 questions, maybe to add to that, or they have been come up. It has always been the big question: sort of what will happen once the Sondervermögen, the special fund, has been spent, and it will be spent. I think my understanding is that all the monies have already been committed. So it's actually gone. And sort of what happens next? Sort of when will we see this big shift to meet the NATO goal of 2% in the regular budget? Or is the thinking we'll have another Sondervermögen, another special fund? Or do you just stop thinking with the end of the legislature and say, well, it's not this government's responsibility to come up with a solution to that, and maybe also the European dimension. There has been push from Paris in particular for sort of setting up a large debt-financed budget or a debt-financed fund to finance Europe's rearmament. Is this but in Germany, or the German government seems to be, well, not really reacting to these kind of initiatives. Could you maybe enlighten us where we are standing on that point as well, please?
Well, in the first place, I want to say that I'm not without hope. And hope means for me that we do with this government all the investments that we need to do to have a future. And that means investment in defense. And I clearly say, of course, on the long run and not on the short run, that is clear. But we also need investments like regarding climate change and things like that. So we do need investment a lot, and a lot more that is possible within these rules in the Constitution that we have. So there are different possibilities. There would be different possibilities to do this. You could do it for 2024 and for 2025. You could do these investments, and you could do another Sondervermögen, as you said. But what is missing is the agreement among the government. And so we have a really interesting situation, because the Social Democratic and the Green Party, they would do it. They would do that, and not because they are so happy to have more debts, but because it's what is internationally and nationally needed. And so who refuses this are the liberals and the conservatives. And so regarding the election in September 2025, what should happen afterwards? So those who refuse now to make more debts, they want to win the election, and then they will do exactly this. Is that responsible? I think it would be much more responsible for our industry, for the people in Germany, to do it now with this government, but we need the help of the opposition as well. And as a social democrat, I must say, from 2009 to 2013, we, the Social Democratic Party, were opposition. It was my only time in the opposition. But regarding to what was necessary to do in Europe because of the finance and crisis, we, the opposition, the Green Party as well, as a matter of fact, we were with the government. We helped them with the constitutional majority they needed. And so I really would like to see that the conservatives now would do the same, but it doesn't look like it. And so we have to admit that in Germany, the Schuldenbremse was for 10 years very, very popular among all the people. Everybody said, oh, no, it's really bad to make debt. I voted for the Schuldenbremse, so I think it was right then, but it's 15 years ago. And time has changed, and Zeitenwende means also to ask yourself, and we do this, we did it 15 years ago, but now in this moment, we need different answers, but we need a majority, and we need for that popular voices from the economy, from the industry, from the scientists to help us make this turnaround in the mind of the people that they think to make more debts for this is almost like a crime. So it's not. It would be worse to do it not. But to think in a democracy that the Social Democratic Party and the Green Party will be able to make this turnaround all by ourselves, that would be suicide in the front of elections. So I want to remind you that in the time of 2009 to 2013, when Social Democrats were not in the government, that was the time that the German national budget was cut by 8 billion euros. It was the liberals and the conservatives who cut it. And when I was a state secretary with Olaf Scholz and a finance minister, we had a budget of defense with Wolfgang Schäuble at that time, 2018. We had a budget by 37 or 38 billion euros. And 4 years later, we have 51. So we do a lot, and I know Olaf Scholz and Boris Pistorius, we would like to do more. My party is would do that. The Green Party would do that, but the Liberals do not want to. And this, although regarding the G7 nations, we have the lowest debts. We have the lowest debts, but with the lowest debts, we are not able to help Ukraine and to be a big European reliable partner that we have to be.
Thank you very much.
I hope
yeah,
that was clear enough.
We need to extend the debate to the opposition and to the FDP as well.
Good idea.
And before we do that, though, we are past the 9 o'clock timeline. So please feel free to come in as well, and preferably come in by putting a question in person to the panel, raising your hand, indicating to me that you want to speak. That always makes up for a lively debate. So please think what you would like to ask our panelists. I would give you a few more minutes. There's Peter Linke already. Maybe two others will will want to come on as well. But before we do that, I would like to put it to Dr. Atzpodien. From the Chancellor and from other ministries, we hear that they say, well, the industry knows what happens, even if it's not planned out, if it's not put into our financial planning as such. The industry is well aware that lots of orders will be coming in. But you say that's not enough. Why is that? Why do you need it kind of planned out?
Yeah, first of all, we have seen a situation back in 2022, just after the proclamation of this 100 billion extra budget, when the Ministry of Defense called our industry to support with ideas and to come up with immediately, let's say, implementable ideas to gear up the armament of the Bundeswehr. And I think all of our member companies really activated themselves and came up with offers and so on and so on. However, they were very disappointed because they didn't receive any orders at that time, because it was the regime of preliminary budgetary handling by the government. And so this still creates sort of a disbelief in promises. You know, but I hear from politicians all the time, yeah, we promise to do permanently the 2%, and you all know what that means. It will mean an increase of the budget. But as long as we cannot see these switch to the increase by real figures, I think the promises will not really achieve a change, because each of the companies needs a plausible business case and needs to explain to investors, shareholders, analysts, and so on, why they are going on in building up new capacities, investing even more. And they have done that. So, for example, Rheinmetall prominently told the public that they have increased their capacity for the artillery ammunition from 70,000 shots before the Ukraine war to 700,000, 10 times right now, and even going further. But it needs orders. And Mrs. Hagedorn, I have to tell you, this is all nice to listen to what you are saying. However, you are the government. And I think the government has a responsibility, and you gave in your coalition agreement a promise to the citizens in the first place to really make sure their security. That is what the coalition agreement starts with. And I think now that has to be implemented, and you cannot just refer to the opposition, please help us. Yes, the opposition maybe could help you by authorizing a new extra budget. However, in the first place, it's a responsibility of the government to come up with a solution and to be credible in terms of what they claim themselves. That means we have to be able to deter aggression in 4 or 5 years from now, latest. And that needs Bundeswehr has to receive much more armament, and this kind of planning, which I mentioned, by the MOD itself, of 97 billion for the year 2028, that has to be honored by respective decisions of the government and the parliament.
Thank you very much. And before we go to Peter Linke, one quick question to Christian Mölling from the chat. Helmut Hoffmann asks, sort of, how powerful does NATO need to become to be a deterrent, given that the spending of the West on military hardware is already substantially bigger than what Russia is spending. So could you maybe explain this sort of discrepancy?
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question, because it shows that simply comparing numbers of total spending doesn't give you a clue of what the military power is. So first of all, that's kind of input against output. If you're a very ineffective, very corrupt country, then you don't make much money out of what you put into the system. That's the one thing. The more important thing is, if the economic systems, so those who basically eat up the money and do something with it, are so different compared Russia on the one hand and Europe and the US on the other hand, you have to go for what is called the purchasing power. So what basically you can get for €1. And what you can get for €1 is much more in Russia or also in Ukraine than you can get in Europe. So that's sometimes 3 times or even more what you can get out of the defense budget in Russia. So you basically have to put a grain of salt to just comparing these simple figures. Second point, or third point on that is, even if we go into this kind of spending comparison, this is what Russia gets for the money is the Russian army. Do you want, and do you think the Europeans want to have the Russian army, so the way the Russians are equipped and trained for the European democracies? This doesn't work. We have standards. We care about our soldiers. That basically means that every weapon we produce and every ammunition we produce is highly secure. It will not explode while you transport it. Russia doesn't care about whether 70% of the ammunition possibly is lost on the way to the battlefield. So this is something where I say, wow, there's a lot of good literature coming out more and more on what is called purchasing power comparisons, and especially military purchase power comparison. Go into it. It's really an interesting read. And I think even The Economist some weeks ago had an article on it. So it's good that these things make more waves.
Thank you very much, Christian. Now it's time to hear from our audience as well. Peter Linke was first. Please introduce yourself and put your point or question to the panel.
My name is Peter Linke. I'm an independent researcher based in Kazakhstan, in Almaty. I have a question. So the first question would be, to what extent is the German science community ready to actively participate in the defense effort? And the second question to our guest from the industry, maybe, what's in your view, what's the relationship between traditional defense, the traditional defense industry and the budding startup scene in Germany?
Thank you very much. Next up is Arne Lietz. Please introduce yourself and put your question to the panel.
Hello, my name is Arne Lietz, former member of the European Parliament. My question goes on the issue of military mobility. Is this already been discussed amongst the SPD or inside the Bundestag in regard to equip the harbors, the train situations, the intermodal situations, and is that already being discussed to put in place for this upcoming budget? Thank you.
For this round, the last person to put a question is Peter Weil. Please introduce yourself and put your question to the panel.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's Peter Weil. I'm with Deutsche Telekom for strategy and portfolio, mainly for Eastern Europe. My question is back to Bettina on this budget and making that, and so I understand to say, okay, you cannot fully square the circle, so more debts may be a solution. But what about the other part of the discussion? What are the main things where to do less to free up money in all this discussion? Could you perhaps say 1-2 things about this to get it more balanced? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And since I think most questions are addressed to Bettina Hagedorn, maybe please start picking the points you want to address, and then we also give the others a chance to respond.
Okay, thanks a lot. So I will start with the last question. Where can we free money in other budgets from other ministers? Where can we do less to do more for defense? That is a discussion. And of course, we start in Parliament from September to November and change the budget proposal of the government. Every year we do this. We never decide in Parliament a budget that is original done by the government. But the money we are talking about it's such a big 25 billion euros is the leg that is the money that is Christian Lindner and Olaf Scholz are talking about for 2025. I would say it would be even more than 25 billion that is missing. You cannot this money find with everything that is decided in Germany. That is ridiculous. And of course, we can save some money, but it's this much of the money that is missing for investment to the future. So we really have a financial turnaround. I told you that from 2008, when we put on in the limiting of the debt in our constitution, till now, it is also, to my opinion and to the opinion of most of the people in Germany, to my mind, it was very famous to have this limit. And I agree. I thought it was right. But now things have changed. And Zeitenwende means also to define what needs to change in this. And I know, and Christian Lindner and the liberals always say so, in this coalition, we decided to respect this constitution with this limit of debts. And that's true. But that was 3 months before the aggression in Ukraine started. And so if everything changes, then this has to change as well. And I want to say something to Mr. Atzpodien, because he said, you are the government. He said to me, no, we are the parliament. And the government, as you know, is just now, and I said till the 3rd of July, trying to find compromises for the budget 2025. That's their job. It's not the job of the parliament. And we then afterwards discussed. But I said, where's the problem? The problem is that in this situation, the investment that needs to be done will not be possible if nothing changed with the debt limit. It will not be possible to, and you know, everybody, if Friedrich Merz or Christian Lindner or whoever says we want to save this, and we need to lower the pensions or stuff like that, it's ridiculous. You do not find enough money, and so there is. This will be the question. So the next time you should ask Christian Lindner to take part in your panel.
We will try. Dr. Atzpodien, you wanted to come in as well.
So, Mrs. Hagedorn, I didn't mean you personally, but as representative of the Social Democrats. And I think if a government in this key situation is not able to solve an issue which is seen as really existential for our nation, then this has to have some consequences. But this is another topic. I would like to come back to the questions of Peter Linke first. Science community, I think we still have more than 70 universities and respective institutions which are practicing a so-called civil clause, which means banning research on military and armament issues, which is not in line with what we really need. And this shows the mismatch between our, let's say, mental attitude to the issues of deterrence, of armament, and what we are doing in research institutions in our country. And that also has to do with the second question you put, what's the relationship between the defense industry and startup scene? It's basically good. There are also service providers which are working on the coming together of these two sides. However, startups, as we know, have the problem also with banks, for example, and investment funds, that they find especially from the funding side, a problem in funding classical defense issues. And this has to do, again, with our culture under the auspices of ESG, not to really see weapons which are meant to maintain our peace and our security as a contribution to sustainability according to the Green Deal. Last point, Arne leads. What is the logistics situation? I think we in Germany will, in a situation of crisis, be the turning table for many troops, also the troops coming from the US, going to the eastern part of the NATO territory. We have to reflect this, and I think it still needs much more attention, because it is not only the logistics for military which has to work, it's also the logistics for the civil population and the and all of the to provide enough food to the people, and all this which has to come together. And I think that needs much more attention and much more reflection, and also much more money.
Thank you very much. Christian, do you also want to come in?
Yeah, just only very short. On the readiness to also, you know, from the academic side to take part in the debate. You see that, I mean, this is taking place. If you compare that with other countries, then of course, the general function of questions of war and peace having not been discussed across all the dimensions. That's especially about you know, how do you fight a war, and what are the political consequences to be ready to do this? How do you basically do deterrence, etc., etc.? These have been points that have not been welcomed for the last 30 years, and that's where we are. In principle, it's rather simple, right? If you go into the funding structures of which topics have been funded over the last 30 years and which have not been funded, then yes, and you have some people who participate in the discussion, but the overall, let's say, breeding ground or academic context in which you can exchange views, in which you also can be proven right or wrong, is not as good as it could be if you compare it with other countries where these questions of military power as part of a public debate don't have their place in the society. And it's only since recently, I think Germany has improved significantly over the last 2 years. And comments about us starting to discuss individual weapon systems, you could argue about it, but it's something that if you would have previewed that 4 years ago, people would have called you completely nuts.
Thank you very much. I've got one raised hand from a room where I see 3 people. Please put your question to the panel and with an eye on the clock. That's probably the last one, if not someone else wants to jump in, and then we have a final round across the panel. But please go ahead, introduce yourself and put your question to the panel, please.
Good morning. I'm not sure the name is written indeed. François Brunet from the Financial Attaché in the French Embassy. Some of you have been mentioning the external dimension to the debate, which obviously I can only confirm. I'd like to hear all the panelists perhaps on what's on the table at the moment at the European level, EDIS and EDI, and perhaps even more on indeed the ideas that have been floated by Paris recently.
Thank you very much. A reminder that Germany is no island when it comes to also the questions of finance. That is a very important point. I tried to put it to Frau Hagedorn earlier. Maybe actually maybe let's turn sort of to the European dimension for final round across our panel, starting with Bettina Hagedorn. Is there sort of hope that some of the budget constraints we are addressing here in Germany, there's a European solution to it? Or is this also something which the FDP will not go along with?
Well, you have to ask the FDP, the liberals. But of course, we have the hope, I have the hope, and a lot of my colleagues in the budget committee have the hope that after the 9th of June, after the election and in Europe, that maybe the liberals will be more able to find compromises with us regarding what we do, because the more voices from not only from the science, but also from the industry, that of course helps. Regarding the liberals, it would help to have more support from the industry to make sure that we need this turnaround in the financial debate this summer, not summer 25 before the election, now. And it's the responsibility of this government. And I want to say something, because you said you need certainty for the long run, and I agree totally. So this certainty comes from the finance plan that the government has as a proposal has to offer with the budget 2025 in the beginning of July or in summer. And the finance plan is only an instrument of the government. It is not discussed and decided by Parliament. We only discuss and decide about the budget for 2025. But I think it would be not only necessary, but it would be a strong sign from the liberals to make this turnaround. So I'm hopeful that they will do, because it's necessary. And of course, it would help if also the Christian Democrats with Friedrich Merz, because they have voices in the countries in Germany where they are in power, that we need exactly this. So if we would be able in Germany to come away from this very polarized discussion, if or if not, that is that is just making us not be able to move, then that would be very strong and would be part of the responsibility that Germany in Europe has. So this is my hope. We can talk about that maybe in August or September when we see the proposal of the government.
We will do. Dr. Atzpodien, is there sort of, do you have hope in any kind of European defense bonds?
Yeah, not in the bonds. I think that is also an issue where we cannot see any alignment between the different key players in Europe. But I think working more together on armament seems to be a no-brainer, but a lot of power-related issues are involved. Also industrial issues are involved. And I can only recommend that the key players which are spending most on defense and on armament in Europe, like Germany, France, Spain, and Italy, they should come up with an initiative to align themselves on future major armament programs. The EU can only incentivize a little bit with, let's say, providing means of less than 10% of the overall spending per year in place in Europe on armament. It's roughly 40 billion spent on armament in the EU. Every year, the EU provides an incentive of less than 3 million maybe. But, you know, that is a different problem. And if you look at EDIS and EDIP, the upcoming new ideas of the Commission for the next period in office, I think they should not overestimate their potentials, and they should more give, let's say, the major countries the push to get an alignment. However, that will be ambitious and it needs a lot of political determination. And very finally, maybe we should try also in Germany to learn a little bit from others. Like the French, for example, have come up with a national program for which they call économie de guerre, economy of war. We cannot say this. It is not in line with our constitutional setup. However, we as BDSV try to push another term, which is economy of resilience. And I can really just try to persuade the government to put up a program for this economy of resilience involving a number of issues which would allow our industry to do armament and to build up new capacities quicker and more easily than we could do this in the past.
Thank you. And with that, I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Please join me in thanking our panelists, Bettina Hagedorn, Christoph Atzpodien, and Christian Mölling, who had already had to leave us since we are 1 minute over time. See us again next week, where we'll be discussing Franco-German relations. And with that, I wish you all a very good day and see you soon again at the German Council on Foreign Relations. And thanks again to our cooperation partner, BAX.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.